Alright, so I'm going to give everybody a quick kind of crash course in an hour in LaTeX. Now, I'm going to go over the basics, and then I kind of want to tailor it to what you guys tend to do in your papers. So, I'll cover like how to actually build the paper, do section commands, bulk title, do some tables, and insert images and figures and stuff like that. And then if there's more advanced things or certain particular things that you often do in papers, especially if you find it frustrating in Word or something like that, then we can kind of go that route. So I'm going to leave part of it like completely open-ended to you guys so that it can be more tailor-made because, what I do in it can be completely different than what you do. So.
Cool.
So real quick, just to go into like what's going on. So it's pronounced LaTeX or LaTeX. I know it's like a really weird thing, but the guy who originally created LaTeX, he was like, the X is not pronounced like an X in English, but it's pronounced like the Greek letter Chi. So it's always, if I say LaTeX or LaTeX, it's commonly how it's pronounced. So that's why everyone always gets a little confused when I say LaTeX or LaTeX. So just to get that out of the way. So basically what tech is itself is it's a typesetting application, and it has basically a whole bunch of low-level primitives of how to build everything. Now, and that is really, really complicated. So LaTeX is actually a markup language that sits on top of tech. And so, do any of you guys know HTML? But so you know how, like, for instance, like if you wanted to make something bold, you would do like open bracket B or strong, and then whatever it is, and then / strong. So it's very similar to that when you're using it. So if you had that general idea of markup, LaTeX is the same thing. So if you're already working with it. And the formats are basically, so you get, in LaTeX you have a lot of different tricky formats in tech, and LaTeX makes it easier to just break down to those. So it's kind of hanging over a whole nother installation of tech. And so it's kind of like interpreting, LaTeX interprets it, turns it into text. So the reason I'm going over this is because when you install it on the machine, if you want to get to that point, you actually download a tech package, and then you download a LaTeX editor. So I'm just helping you disambiguate between the two because it's computer science, so of course they have to make things trickier and get them a bunch of different things. So I'm sure some of you might wonder why I think LaTeX is so awesome. First off, I don't use Word anymore unless I absolutely have to. How many of you have been burned by Word? Lost something that you wrote for a while? I'm trying to think of other just weird things where like you're just fighting with it to get a picture in a certain spot or a table to be in a certain way, or it keeps going on to the next page. All that goes out the window as soon as you start playing with LaTeX. No more just random like, oh, my stuff vanished, or no more sitting there and just trying to like yell at the screen to get a picture of the spot that you want. It's so much easier for formatting and citations and referencing tables and figures, and there's a lot of other things that just make it a lot more easier to use than something like Word where you're just doing everything manually. And it's a lot more robust, so there's tons of different packages out there, which I'll get into, to do different things. So you can actually generate plots within LaTeX. You don't even have to generate them elsewhere if you don't want to. There's entire different math packages for putting in equations and things like that. There's all kinds of other different packages that'll let you put in other special characters that normally wouldn't be there, like, for instance, first-order logic symbols. It's cross-platform, so, for instance, we have one Windows user here, and everyone else on Mac, but LaTeX is the same if you set down a Mac or a Windows machine or a Linux machine. The tech file is the same. You can pass it around. No one's going to complain, I don't have that version, I can't read this. It's completely cross-platform. And it outputs PDFs, which, once again, are completely cross-platform, so anyone can read what it spits out. And why not? No more Word. I really hate Word, and the only time I open up Word anymore these days is to do IRB forms, because we have to. Otherwise, I don't really like touching it. Just sick of markup and losing things and stuff. So going into, all right, so now we're going to get into the actual beginning of some things. So tell me if I'm going too quickly too, by the way, or tell me if I'm going too slowly as well. So I'm going to go first into special characters quickly. Oh wow, that's okay. So in Word or in any word processor, you can type whatever you want or any symbol on the keyboard, and it will just print it out, and that's fine. But in LaTeX, there's actually special characters that are reserved. So there's certain things, like for instance, the $sign does not mean a $sign. It actually enters math mode, and I'll get more into that a bit later. But so with some of these special symbols, You can see them listed here. So open and close brace, the percent sign, tildes, ampersands, hashes, they all have different meanings. So if you actually want to draw one of those or have them write out, basically you just do a backslash and then either one of these. So this is what I'm saying is there's some reserved symbols, so sometimes you might get some weird error or something like that. That's because all of these symbols in here are already used for something else. So if you just do that, or you can do /text backslash / like that. So for instance, if you wanted to print percent sign, it would just be /percent sign, and so on and so forth for other types. So I just want to get those out there first, that they're special characters that are reserved in LaTeX for other things, and it's really easy to print them, so it's not like it's that tricky. But sometimes you might think, oh, I just tried to put an ampersand in, it's not actually writing it. So most editors that you use will actually tell you where and why what you typed is wrong. So, but it's still good to understand that these are just reserved. Spaces are something that is also handled a little weirdly and differently. So it doesn't matter how many spaces you have in LaTeX; it's always just treated as one space. So if you're actually trying, you don't typeset using spaces or anything like that, which I've done personally in Word sometimes when I'm just trying to brute force something into a certain position. And yeah, this is just, there's different spacing things that are in place, but this is always a good thing to mention because the space between sentences is just a little bigger than between words, and that's usually fine, but for some reason you don't like it, or whoever you're submitting to doesn't like something like that, there's ways to remove it, but by default that's how it is, and normally it's becoming pretty standard these days. New line character, which is the /n, is treated as a space as well, and I'll be getting into those too. And paragraphs breaks are actually indicated by a blank line, so that's like if you actually are writing in it and you leave a space in there, that blank line will actually denote, hey, this is the end of a paragraph. So you can see that like the spacing is a little different, but once you start working with it, I promise it will all start to make a bit more sense. And this is another good thing to know too, especially depending on if you're submitting a conference paper or something like that, is that by default, LaTeX will automatically indent every paragraph except for the one after a section heading. So here's like a very, very basic, simple example. So you guys already have some of this stuff up. There's a lot more code already in that sample paper from the right LaTeX. But this would be a very, very, very basic paper. So what you see is, so all this before you actually begin the document is called the preamble. So if you're ever searching for something online that says, oh, put this in your preamble, it means before you actually start the document itself. So everything up here is the preamble. So what this is saying is that we have a document class, and the type is article, which is in the braces here. There's certain different options you can put in. For instance, it says the size of paper and the overall font size that are used. And then just /begin document begins where you actually start writing. And this right here is the actual document itself. So this is just a really simple thing, and then just end document. Makes sense so far? It's a tricky thing to learn to teach this exactly, because some people just pick it up as they learn as they go along, and so I try to think of the best things to go into. But please ever stop me if it's I don't know how to say that.
What font is the default?
So that depends on the document class, which I'll get into in a bit. Usually it just defaults to Times New Roman. So that's another thing that can go in the class options. So you could say up here, career, or something like that. You'd have to put the exact commands for the class type. Or sorry, the class type, which is article. And the reason why the percent sign is already used is because that's how you comment out lines. So I'm sure, even though all of you aren't computer scientists, you've written some code before of some kind. So kind of like the double slash in some languages where it just comments out the line, or for instance, if you're passing around a text file and you want to put a note in somewhere, you can comment that way as well. I've done that before to Ben. Wrote something down and then commented like, hey, Ben, like, is this what we should have here, or should we put this elsewhere? Something like that. So you can also consider that also a way of kind of like putting in comments in Word without all the extra markup and grossness. You can put them right in line. And excuse me, and they don't print when you actually build the PDF too. It's the big comment. So just a real simple example makes sense. So you have the preamble, which sets up how the document should look, and then the document itself. Now the preamble can have a lot more than just one line, but
Now, A4 paper, is that a argument
That's
for the?
letters.
yeah. So you can consider the ones in the square brackets like arguments. So the actual class name is article.
Uh-huh.
There's only a couple standard ones, and I'm going to get to those very shortly. You can consider these arguments. So you can put a bunch in here. You could throw in one that says courier, for instance. You could have courier, A4 paper, 12 point, which means default the font to courier, default the page size to A4 paper, and default the font size to 12 points. So
What's the A? I don't get A4 paper.
oh,
Is
A4
that
is
letter size?
yes,
Like an
like,
8.5
No, it's the paper size.
it's the size of the paper. I think A4s are British, are not British, they're international.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if you just take that out, by default, it'll just do 811.
Thank you.
I stole some of these examples from somebody else's slides because I didn't have time to build all the slides. So
You're all good.
I'm not sure where it was. So going into the classes, like I was saying, oh geez, it's my first time using Keynote. So there's a lot of different types of classes for different types. And sometimes, and this is the really nice part, one of the really nice parts, is that some journals and universities provide their own class type. So, for instance, when I recently submitted a paper to one of the ACM proceedings, which is all computer science stuff, they actually will just give you the file, and you just include it, and when you rebuild your paper, boom, it's already formatted how it should be for submission, instead of spending any time in Word whatsoever. So that's one thing I really, really like. I know it probably doesn't take that long to format, but it just gets really tiring. And you can't blame anything except for their style. So some of them, so we just did an article before, so that's for like a short document without chapters. Reports for much longer things than articles. I tend to just usually use article and then modify it in my own way, unless I'm using a custom class for whatever journal I'm submitting to. If you wanted to write a whole book, there's even books. And so you can see in some of these how they explain. And there's also a letter for correspondences. He kind of explains what they each do and how it slightly tweaks a few things around. Like books will do double-sided, but an article or report won't because you wouldn't submit an article or report double-sided, but books should be because that's what they're actually published. And they also can do slides, but I'm not really going to go into slides because doing slides in LaTeX is messy to say the least, and I personally don't even do it. Hence me using Keynote right now. It's just a little trickier. If you get to the point where you love LaTeX so much, you can always do it. So now we have the classes, and you've gone in and have a little bit of a body in the document. Now, obviously, like the title page or a title header is something that needs to be in every single one. So before you can actually build the title page itself, you have to specify all the information before it. So these are some examples that you would do before it in the preamble. So title, and then in the braces is the actual title name. So you guys starting to kind of see a pattern in how the commands are with / open brace something. It's very, very common. Author would be author's date, so on and so forth. You can have subtitles. And then after you've defined all those, if you put this command after it, the make title, then that actually builds the title itself. So what you'll end up doing, what you'll probably end up doing if you start using LaTeX is you'll have like a kind of default blank file or template that you start with that you keep after a while, and you just won't have to worry about all this and keeping all these little things in as much, because I either use one of my previous versions that I have, or I just grab an old paper and just strip out the actual contents and start putting everything in. That way I don't miss some of these things or have to rewrite it again. So, Elise, what was your question?
Oh, it automatically puts the date in without the little /date.
It's part of make title. Now, if you ever didn't want to have the date in, if you did /date and then just did open and then close the curly braces, boom, date's gone. Because you're basically saying date is nothing. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you did the same with authors or title, it would basically remove it. Because you're removing the definition from it. But for date, it defaults to the current date unless you say, don't put a date in. And that's the kind of thing that, and I'll remind you again later, but when you're Googling for things like that, it'll show really quickly, like, if you just Google LaTeX, like, don't show date in title, that the first hit would be something like, oh, just do /date, open, close, and you're done. So a lot of people also use LaTeX, so there's a big community, which is good because there's lots of resources out there.
Looks like they make tons of templates as well.
Yes, there are tons of templates for tons of different things too, so it's always good to look often. And I was going to mention that when I get to the resources, but
Sorry.
that's cool. But yeah, it's always good to look and see if somebody's already done what you're trying to do. Riley, for instance, came to me and was like, "Oh, do you know a package that anyone's ever used for, when we're trying to write down everything from videos and what people are saying?" And I said, and we looked a bit and couldn't really find one. And he was like, well, he was about to write his whole package for it. And instead, I was like, well, let's think about how you can use a table, for instance, to very easily do it. And I'm going to show tables later, but it's kind of the nice things that you can, a table doesn't need to be just a table. A table can actually be used for transcription as well. So there's lots of ways to kind of abstract away some of the different types of things that you can do. So anyway, so there's obviously ways to name your sections in your papers. We all do it. So I'm just going to pull them all out here real quick. Sorry. So you have like part, section, subsection, sub-subsection, paragraph, subparagraph. Generally, the kinds of ones that you would use are section and subsection, and then maybe sub-subsection if you go down that far. Generally, in my papers, I never get further down than the subsection, but that's obviously what you guys know. The short title and title, the short title is not necessary, so that's the other part that I probably should have mentioned earlier. Kind of like when you were asking before, are the arguments. And they are, again, in the sense here, and just like arguments, they're not necessary. So the short title would only print if you actually made a table of contents. The only thing that's actually required is what's in the curly braces. So, for instance, if you did section and then curly braces and then the title name, that would obviously just call that the section, that title name. And then if you wanted to have a different name or a shortened name for the table of contents, that's where you could put it in there. So just keep that there, trying to show you what you can do, which is exactly what I just said. And then also book and other report-like classes, there's also a chapter which does the same thing. So now we're getting into fun stuff. So bibliographies are awesome in LaTeX, and with another language called BibTeX. How many of you use Google Scholar? Not everyone? What do you use for your resources? Have you used Google Scholar?
Yeah, I have.
Because I'll show you something cool with this. I'll break out of the presentation in a second. But so you can keep your whole bibliography set in a different language called BibTeX, which is very similar, and you keep it in a separate file. And so it's basically, they call it a database in a sense, and so you have a bunch of different entries in one file, and then at the end of the file you actually have /bibliography and then the name of the file without the .bib names. So when we get to the exact example, I'll show you, but it's a very easy way to just include all your references without having to use anything else to track them.
Can you use Mendeley?
I haven't played with Mendeley much with LaTeX. I would be surprised if they didn't have some sort of plugin actually that helped, because it just seems to make sense. Does Mendeley have a way to export them? I bet you one option is BibTeX. It is? Okay. So you can take that and put it into your bib file, and then we'll show you exactly kind of what it looks like. Or you can pull them off of Google Scholar, which I'll show you that too, which is why it's awesome. And you can also change the actual style of the bibliography. So when we start playing around more, I can show you some of those commands that are in there. But there's different styles, and so if your bibliography isn't looking the way it should for a certain paper, or you want it in a certain way, you can either, one of the best ways is just Google it and say, hey, I'm looking for an APA style bibliography, or I need style bibliography. And then the nice part about that is you have all of these different things in your BibTeX file, and it just tells you like authors, titles, where it's published, things like that. However you set the style tells it how to actually print the information. So you can literally just change whatever is just in here from APA to MLA, and boom, you have MLA style references. All you changed was 3 letters. So it makes your life really easy with your bibliography. So, and then, So what you would do to make it is, I commonly, what I'll do is I will name my paper something .tech. So, paper.tech, and then I will name the bib file kind of the same name, like paper.bib. And that way it's just easy to keep them together. So you basically enter the details for each one using this special syntax, which I'll handle in a second. So one thing is BibTeX will automatically convert the title text all lowercase except for the first one, and there is a way around it, so that's a good thing to have. Like, that's why I included it, because I'll send this PDF out as well. Because if you ever have to have something capitalized within a title, for instance, like an acronym or something like that, this will force it to actually do that. And then and this is another nice thing, so each entry that you actually have in this BibTeX file has a label, and that's actually how you reference it. So here's kind of an example entry in a BibTeX file. So it would be, at, and then whatever type of piece of work it is, book, article. I'll show you that. Mendeley will spit this out, and so will Google Scholar. And then the first thing is its label, and its label is important because that's actually how you reference it, which we're going to get to the next slide. And you can see all it is. It just very simply says, "Oh, the author is so and so. The title is so and so. That the edition is this. The publisher is this. The years." So on and so forth. Everything that's just plain text is in quotes, but everything else isn't. But you don't need to worry about this much because things like Mendeley and Google Scholar just spit this out for you. So you don't. But I just kind of want you guys to kind of get what's there. So this is what actually gets printed, and this is what you use to reference it. So you don't actually. You can call this whatever you want, just to make it easy to reference. Usually, the most common thing is just the last name of the first author in the year. It's just very easy to remember that way. So now that you have all these different things within one file, actually let me break out real quick and just show you what I meant by what Google Scholar if you do. So I'm just going to grab something random here. Not like this though. Someone give me solid mechanics, right? Is this me doing solids right now?
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually find something, I don't know if any of you have seen this little site link that each one has, but it actually spits them all out in different ways, and right down here in the corner is import to BibTeX. Go copy that and put that right into your BibTeX file, and you can reference it that way. Is that making sense so far?
I missed something. Where's the BibTeX file going?
In the same directory as your text file.
Okay.
What's the extension?
Bib. I said that earlier.
So I can do it like in a notepad or whatever?
Yeah, so you can use any plain text editor. I was going to get into the actual software. We're going to play in write LaTeX just because it instantly shows you what it's been done. But the one thing to note too about this, and it's kind of annoying, and I always take it off, but they always put the first word of the paper when you export it from Google. I take it off just because it's more in the type. Kind of a pain, but you can see how nice it is that you can get that for any paper. So by default, they do them completely numerically. That's just the default way LaTeX does it. But like I was saying before, you can do different styles, and if you change the bibliography style, it can change the citation style as well. So if you change it to MLA, you'll do MLA style citations. And then there's a bunch of different actual bibliography. So there's a lot of different packages that I've been mentioning so far. And so there's different kinds. So NatBib, new APA. So you can see there's a bunch of different actual types. And so what you can do is, this is what's great about the community of it, is that if you want your bibliography in a certain style, usually the best way is to just Google it, and your first hit will be exactly what you need to get in that style. I use APA for everything, and I tend to use the NatBib package for it. But it really just becomes a certain way. And you can also choose between, if you want numerical citations or if you want parenthetical citations or textual citations. And, I'm actually going to go into some examples right now, so it makes more sense. So basically, what you do is, once again, it's a slash cite. Now, if you want to cite textually, it's just cite with a T on the end. And if you want to cite parenthetically, it's just cite with a P after it. Now, it's the same kind of things as before, where whatever's in the curly braces is what's needed. So this, if you remember from earlier, that one BibTeX thing, this was the label that we gave it. So you can just simply say cite T, and this is exactly what will actually get spit out. Now, with the kind of arguments, like Tim said before, you can, if you wanted to cite it, for instance, the page, you can give it that page. So you can give other different information in it. Like you can even put the word C in if you want. So
What's the difference between cite P and cite T?
So cite P, these are all parentheticals,
Oh, there you go.
and these are textual citations. So, for instance, you can use cite T if you sorry, I said Lamport, 1994 stated, instead of, it was stated that blah, 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 blah. So it's nice to be able to do both. And there's even more than that, too. These are like the basic ones, but there's like a whole list of other types, too. And also depends on what bibliography package you're using. So that's nice. So the really nice part of that is, so you have your bib file and you have all those labels. And so if you want to cite something, you don't need to remember the year or the author or anything. All you need to remember is the labels. And oftentimes when I'm writing LaTeX, I keep my bib file open so that I know what to cite. I know what all the labels are, if there's a ton of citations, or depending on what tool you use, some of them actually have built-in tools where if you actually type /cite and then open a curly brace, it will only be able to pull from what's in your bib file at that time. So it's pretty nice. So another thing that is obviously we do a lot is images. So there's a package called graphics that's used. So anytime you're using additional packages, which you'll run into often if you start Googling, like, oh, how do I do X? And they might say, oh, well, it's really good in this package. This is part of the preamble, is where you actually say use package. So if you're doing graphics, you would have use package graphics at the top, which I haven't even looked at it fully, but I'm probably 99% sure it uses that on the right LaTeX. So you can see that's at the top there. To create a figure, it's literally begin, figure, and then these things, H, T, B, and P, have to do with the actual placement of them. You can kind of play with that a bit more on your own. It's kind of easiest to just do them and see how they actually react in different situations. Usually H and T, like if you do HT, you can do any combination of those. Apologize, I cannot remember what the letters stand for offhand, but HT will actually help put it in like a specific location. Sometimes LaTeX will put some images and figures in certain locations because it believes it's the best spot, and you might not always want that, and so things like using H and T will actually force it to be in that location. So it's very heavily typeset, but you can break it sometimes if need be. But sometimes LaTeX thinks it knows best, and it will look nicer, but sometimes you don't want to, for instance, show a figure before you reference it, or is it the other way around?
H means here, T means top, B means bottom, and P means page of flip.
There you go. So if you did H, you do it here, as in like here within the code. Like say you have a paragraph, and then you start with finish, because it's more than just that. So this is the beginning of the figure, and then you can do /centering if you want to center it. And then it's simply include graphics and then the image name. Once again, like Elise asked, you have it in the same directory as your tech file, and you don't need to put the suffix in the .jpeg or .gif.
What fits under figure? Just tables and pictures, or?
So this is just for any figure, really. So the reason why I'm showing all this is because usually when you put an image in, you're referencing it as a figure. This line here is the only thing that actually puts the image in.
Yeah.
This begins a figure, and here I'll go down to the end, and then you actually end the figure.
Right.
Now so you'd actually begin this figure, and then you can give it a caption as well, and then you actually end that figure, because later you can reference it just like you cite. Just like how you can do /cite, you can actually do /ref, and in kind of in the same fashion, each thing has its own label, so you can just do /ref label name, and it'll reference that. Okay, so I'm going to break out of this for a bit, and I think we should kind of start to play around a bit with a few things. And also, I wanted to go over tables, but I wanted to do it up here, and this thing is so tiny that you can only see one side. That's awesome. So, all right, if you go to where they actually have the table in the right LaTeX, because this is another thing I wanted to show quick, and it's easier to just bring in a whole bunch of extra work. So making tables is actually nice and simple. So, like a figure, it's one thing you begin the table name, and this centers it as well, but you don't have to do that now. When you're beginning any table, when you actually do /begin tabular, and then what is in these curly braces defines how big the table will be, how many columns wide. So you have an L and an R, which means that, and with a pipe between them. So that means that you'll have two columns, and one will be left justified, and one will be right justified. So you could have as many as you want. Like, so for instance, if you wanted to do, sorry, marker. Oh, great, yellow marker.
Here's one over here. I don't know if it works, but.
This is what erase that one. I'm off without it. Basically, what I was just going to say is, say you wanted to do a huge table with, you say, these are, I'm going to do, they're not capital L's, but I'm going to draw them as capital L's just so you can tell the difference between them. So, say you wanted 5 left justified columns, you would just have that in the braces. So you can make it as big as you want, but you're defining it before you actually start building it. And then the rows, you start populating as you go on. But does that make sense?
Oh, interesting. So if you have a huge table then you're going to be writing a lot of L's. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Could you just, if it is an image, could you just import it?
oh yeah, I mean, if you want to make your table somewhere else, yeah, you can.
Cool.
The nice part about making the tables within LaTeX themselves is if they need to be scaled for any reason, like say you write it without any columns and then you use columns in the journal that you're submitting to, for instance. The image might get kind of compressed in an odd way, but if you do it in LaTeX, it'll automatically just kind of sort everything out on its own. So yeah, I mean,
Now can you do like mathematical functions?
we can do that too. I'm about to get something
Okay.
that's in there, and that's why the $sign is actually a reserved character, because that's how you get a math going. Yeah, so sometimes they do get kind of big, and you're kind of like, oh, geez, I have these two things. I've made some pretty big tables, but I find it nice and useful actually to be able to just do it this way, because after that, each line is simply, so since this is just 2 columns, it just does one, like this would actually be, so item, ampersand, quantity means like item is in the first column, quantity is in the second. You can see from how the output is, that's why I actually bring it up, because the output over here is about this big. And then the double slash is the end of a line. And then they did the H line, which is shorthand for a horizontal line, so that's how they actually got the line underneath it. And then you can see that they did widgets in the number 42 and gadgets in 13. You can see there's no line between the two because there's no H line between them. So,
Isn't that how they do the vertical?
so this pipe actually here defines the vertical. So you could actually do LRRRR without the pipes in them, and you wouldn't get any verticals. Or say you wanted a third one that this one doesn't, so you can mix and match and stuff like that. So it's pretty simple to.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say. A lot of people seem kind of like scared sometimes when they see LaTeX and they see all this markup, but once you start messing with it, you're starting to see patterns, right? And, like, I'm not crazy.
It's like a step function, and learn it.
So that's tables, and then this is probably one of the bigger reasons that a lot of people, especially you engineering folk.
How do you center stuff in the table column?
So that's what these letters actually stand for, is the justification. So this is one left justified and one right justified. So if you look at
Can I put a C?
So it's not to get to, so you can do L, R, or C.
Yay.
And so yeah, go ahead, like
okay.
yeah. So
I
like,
get it.
while I'm doing this, feel free to like
Oh, you can actively.
yeah. So
What?
with that's why I picked right
Kind of
I didn't know
LaTeX.
it was.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you can sit there and make little changes and see what it does, and so that's kind of why I wanted to show you the basics and let you guys play around. And
How's it? Does it auto update?
Yeah, it should. Like if you change something over in
That's why I started playing with
this
it.
source.
I should add another L. Would it not do anything because it won't propagate?
So you added another L, but now you only have 2 columns worth of data.
That's what I think. So
Yeah.
you then would have to propagate the
Yeah. So
column.
if you didn't actually put data into that column, then it wouldn't be present.
Does it matter that went to screensaver?
No, the light's on. I'm gonna have to walk up and
I don't know how Max did.
that machine set to never
Do
sleep.
you have Mac?
Yeah, I don't know how Max types on so any more questions on tables or figures or anything like that?
So it doesn't matter if your table is big as far as rows, it just matters as far as like.
Yeah, you're really just defining the columns and then
Yeah,
you
so
write
this
in
defines
all
the columns, and then each one of these is a row.
Okay,
That's so cool.
that is really cool.
That's
Okay.
not so bad.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
And then like how Tim was saying, like, well, why not just use an image? It scales it. See, these things can get scaled in any way. They're like vector graphics. So you
Yeah.
can make the table and like, oh, I want this table to be huge for my poster. You literally copy that and just change a few things around, and also you got the same table and it's scaled up huge, and you can put it up with something else. So that's the nice part about it. Is, yeah, you can. I constantly, and once you start writing in LaTeX, you constantly start cherry picking bits of your own code.
So then can you reference tables that you, so say you put this table
Yeah, I was
here and
about
then you
to.
wanna,
I was about to go into the referencing.
How do you do that live comment that you can see? Here's a comment in the margin. It's orange.
That's right, LaTeX has.
It's to do.
Subsection comment.
yeah, so you have
Yeah,
to,
that to-do
you
function.
write it inside the paragraph.
So
You do slash.
yeah, there are other ones like that do.
To do looks like it's doing the highlighting. This is an inline comment. What's that? What about the here's the comment no, margin?
It's the same thing. So it's slash to do, curly braces will do the margin one, but slash to do with the
The reason why it's kind of like earlier when we were
thing.
talking. So if you look at this, this is the orange one
Mm-hmm.
in that example. So it's just right in the middle of it. So it'll point to right in that spot, kind of like an inline comment in Word. And then this one here actually says it, or not inline. This one says inline here. So it's once again like the argument. So you can tell it to be inline like this green comment here, or if you put it right in place, it'll just be that comment right in place.
what colors are there? Because that one says green exclamation point 40.
Just tons of colors. Just search them.
Do they use like certain like RGB or?
They
They have their own-
tend to use that's
color
green
code.
with an intensity value of 40.
Ah,
Up to what?
interesting.
100?
Probably.
So yeah, you can look and
254.
see. It's usually colored with color name. For things like that, it's not as important.
How'd they change it with the to do with the orange one? They didn't reference.
I haven't used to do very often, but I'm guessing. I'm not guessing. By looking at this,
Default
since
color.
there's nothing felt, that's just the default color.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm sure if you put like
doesn't
another
matter.
to do in right now, it would turn it orange unless you fed in a different color equals.
Yeah, so it's just like the
So that would be useful, for instance, if you're passing it around amongst a bunch of people and each person could have a color. I like what Word does, but you don't have to deal with words very much.
no. Kind of a stupid question. Can you have this on your desktop so you don't have to have the
Yes, and I'm going to get into that. I didn't want everyone to come in installing different software on different
Cool.
machines and stuff like that, but yeah, I have
That's a
some
really good link.
resources at the end. Now, something Mary asked earlier was about referencing these figures and tables. So, I'm just looking for it here. So, okay, they do it in kind of a nested way in here.
Mhm.
But if you look in, for instance, with this figure, the picture of the frog,
Mhm.
you have this command here, /label.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So, /label, and you can say it says fig : frog.
Frog,
And you
yeah.
can see up here it says /ref.
Oh.
So you can reference that. So you can say, oh, in figure, ref that figure number, that figure
Okay.
name. So whatever label you give it, just like the BibTeX file, in a sense. So whatever label it is, you just give it that one. So it's down here as part of the caption. You can actually have it as a separate command, as long as it's before you add the figure or the table. You can still have that command in. So you can just excuse me, just put /label. It doesn't have to have a colon or anything either. Like you call it frog.
But okay. And then
Sure.
and then say if you wanted to like copy, like you created a table and then you also wanted it the same table on another page. So then, how
Like
would you do
the
that?
table printed again?
Yeah, like the table printed
You
again.
just copy and paste the code.
Okay.
That's simple. Now if you just want to reference it, it's just ref.
And then if you want,
Which is
Well-
great, which is one of the things that I love about it. Because say you go all the way back to the beginning, and say you put a new figure in your introduction.
Yeah.
In Word, you'd have to go through and check every single thing, bump everything up a number.
Yep.
If you do it in LaTeX, it just automatically bumps all the numbers up for you. And so when you do slash, so you always just reference them by using the ref command.
Yeah.
And then you can label them whatever you want so it makes sense to you, and that's it. So you don't have to worry about the numbering, and so that'll spit out like how you see when you get the caption. It'll say like, oh, figure 1, a frog sitting on a log. I don't know the actual.
So is the tilde
This is a figure.
the figure number?
How does that get spit out?
Figure 1. So I'm wondering if like this
Yes.
figure 1 is caused by the little tilde.
No, so the word figure is that you can use the tilde or a space, either or. It doesn't matter when you're leading up to a command. That's just one way that people like to put in spaces, just because it makes it more continuous, and the fact that like those two things are connected, because it's figure, and then you're doing slash, and then the slash ref fig frog is what actually gives you the number 1. So it keeps track of the figure numbers for you.
If you put
Yeah.
a space instead, year 1 can be like carriage returned over
Yeah,
with
that's what I
the
was saying.
tilde.
It keeps it together.
I thought you just meant like it looks more together.
No,
instead of
I meant like
text,
it keeps it all together.
but I see what you're saying.
So you said before that you didn't need to have the acronym at the end, so it says frog.jpg. You can take the JPEG off and it'll still know to
Mhm.
reference.
Unless there's two things named frog.
Yeah.
Like if there's frog.png and frog.jpg. But yeah. You don't have to. I might not be happy if you do it on here. It might be.
Yeah, I just took it off and it still works.
It still work. So that means there's only one frog.
And that they're in the same directory. Is there a way to reference things in another directory?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Like, could you shove all your images in something called images and just do like slash images as long as it's just like a
I
subdirectory?
think so, but I don't want to say definitely yes. Because personally, I like to put everything in one folder. But
Especially for like creating a bibliography and like if you're, using common sources for like different papers.
Mm.
well, so with this, you can only name one bib file at the end. But if you switch to LaTeX and you're using BibTeX all the time, and say you're using a bunch of resources for one paper, you can just take those entries in that .bib file and just dump them into the new one.
That's true. Okay.
So, or if you're using something like Mendeley as well, you can generate them all. But
Is there a cute little plugin like for Word for those, or do we really have to make the .bib by ourselves?
first of all, you're just copying and pasting. to make it happen.
No.
Second, we're not using Word. You don't write any of this in Word.
No, I know, but is there some like editors where
Any-
I can like
Any plain text editor.
connect it to my Mendeley
So, like Emacs?
like Word does?
I'm not sure. I don't use Mendeley. That's a good thing to look up. I'm just gonna admit I don't know. But
Mhm.
for instance, like, so I get what you're getting at, and you know what does have that is
Word.
Touche.
Devil's advocate here.
No, what does actually have? Oh, why did I switch out the Chrome? What does actually have that is Sublime Text, which I know some of you probably don't have.
So that
I
is
use
an
Sublime.
editor.
Slime's great.
Sublime has a free LaTeX plugin,
Uh,
and I'll show you how awesome it is. So I'm gonna bring up an example of one of my papers.
I didn't even try it. I just saw it
To kind of go into some of this stuff.
because I can sync it and then I can go on my iPad and highlight things and comment things and sync it and then I can see all those comments.
So this is actually an example of one of my papers to kind of go and just go through a whole bunch of what an actual one looks like, and also show you why certain tools are. So you can see. So I wanted to show you some of the stuff how this is shown in action. So you see all this classes, ACM, proc, article, SP. That's just something I downloaded from ACM, which is the Association of Computational Machinery, I believe. And that's just their style. So that's the class that I use because I don't want to have to deal with formatting my paper in any way. You can see I don't have, this is a comment Ben left right at the top for me to see at one point. So it might be helpful to add There's a few other packages that I use that I mentioned in the preamble, and then right here at the beginning you can say I do begin document. Now this looks all crazy and weird, but your author list can get like that at times. So because myself and Aaron and Zod and another CS professor, Sam Geyer, and Ben were all on the paper. So for each one, you need to say, oh, this is the author, here's their address, here's their email. This is the author, here's their address, this is their email. And at the very end of it, just like before, make title. Now, there's sometimes there's special things like a lot of things like when you do begin abstract, it will actually make it look different than others. And then this has some categories and keywords. So you can see, for instance, here. So I'm using section headings. There's tons of different citations. You can do if you do commas in between them. That's how you can cite multiple things at once. So this is kind of how it looks with like a whole paper instead of just something like Great LaTeX. So you can see most of it is just a lot of plain text with just the markup around it, which is why I sometimes liken it to HTML because you write HTML in a similar fashion if you're going to put it all on one page. So yeah, I keep having sections, and I think.
What are the colors?
Oh, that's just my own colors.
I know, but the ones like inside the plain text?
Oh, the green?
Quoting?
They're in quotes. That's all.
Now, is that just like
This is just my
double
text
quote,
editor.
or you have to do single quote? 'Cause
That's
it looks like single quote.
Oh, like this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Cheesy.
LaTeX is weird. It doesn't like double quotes like this, but most LaTeX editors will turn it into like that.
How do you?
So you just do 2 apostrophes to make.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Now some editors are fine with the double, and it'll transfer it properly. So it's just whatever. So this is why I didn't want to like have everyone in different environments say because they'd be like, oh, I'm putting in double quotes and it's fine. Someone else going, like, what? It's not working for me. So yeah, there are little differences and you get used to them pretty quickly. I think they even have a nice. Here's a huge big table right here, actually. So just showing you I have the same thing.
Zombies.
Yeah, so this is talking about different metaphors used in computer science. So it's some
Do
of
you have
these.
2 or 3 columns?
So with some of this, I use a package called Multirow, and I can actually show you what this looks like. And so, for instance, right here I have Multirow 2 for heaps, and if I actually build this real quick. What Multirow does is it was here with heaps, and so sorry, like it'll like for instance here, it's across more than one.
So it's a merge cell command.
Oh, that's so cool. Wait, can you show me the
The coding.
Yeah, the coding.
I wish that I had a higher resolution on here. I could keep both that. Go away. Okay.
Okay.
So a good one, for instance, is pointers. So here I have 1 star pointers, and if you go back into here where I have pointers,
Pointers, yeah.
as opposed to so it had the 1 as opposed to 1 with some of them have 2, like for instance classes and objects. So.
Oh, yeah, at the bottom.
And so what that is that's just because it's spanning 2 here. Otherwise it would be top center.
I get it.
But this only spans 1. I only have it span 1 because I
Yeah.
want it in the middle of 3. So sometimes you have to kind of massage it a bit
Oh, interesting.
to make certain things like this. But there's different packages too. So this was like I didn't know how to do this before I did it, and so I just Googled, LaTeX table span multiple rows, and someone said, oh, well, this package called Multirow, and they showed some examples. And once you start playing with it a bit, you can kind of see how it happens. There's another one for here, and so basically it's saying like you're putting it in the middle of that many rows. This one actually has 5 because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So wait, so if you wanted, okay, so if you wanted it to
It-
span like 2 rows, you'd do 2 star
Mhm.
pointers?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's something like
So
this.
that's the centering, but how do you get it to have like 3 to 1?
Oh, that's just the centering command.
Like, yeah, so his little like 3-star pointers, it's just making pointers in the middle.
Middle.
But card catalogs file, and zombies all being next to pointers. How'd you do that?
Yeah, how did you do that?
So
Specificity.
So you can see here, I have card catalogs and nothing, and I am line. And then I have file folders and multi-row. So I don't even know why this could actually just say M pointers. And then zombies, and it just blinks.
So because you didn't put anything,
And this C line means
Oh,
don't
interesting.
make that horizontal line in between. So that it's one big
oh, it's
cell.
the C line.
Oh, so it's there. It's
Oh,
just you
cell
can't see it.
line.
Yeah, cell line. Exactly.
That's cute.
Yeah, so a lot of things are just shortened and eventually you'll, like H line is horizontal line.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets rid of some extra cell lines.
Oh.
So like there's tons of different ways, and the multi-row is not like a default package. It's a special way for spanning multiple things like that. But anytime that you want to actually go in and change some things around, like I said, Google it. I have some references I list that are really good places to look through. Most of the time, they'll probably hit on Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow. Is it Stack Exchange for Tech? I don't know. But that's what they'll actually hit. So you can see, like I labeled them here, like I just labeled them mappings. And later I actually reference it, like right here, table/ref mapping details the mappings parts. And who was it that asked about? You were asking about linking, right, Elise?
I don't remember. What do you mean by
Linking your sources. So, for instance, this is why I like this specific tool. If I type in /site and then open the braces in this, I get every single thing that's in my bib file. So these are already all in a bib file, and they're just telling me the ones.
Oh, that's so cool.
So this is something built in for Sublime Text only.
Oh, okay.
Now Sublime Text is not free, but
This is.
Yeah, that's,
wait, it's free?
mm-hmm.
I thought it was paid.
You can also pay for it, but
Oh,
technically you can just do the free trial and then just never end it.
okay. Well, then I highly recommend Sublime Text because it's great for things like this. So if you open my bib file, there already is entries for all these. So if you're using it in Sublime Text, you don't have to worry about remembering what is what or anything like that. I can simply say, oh, I want to quote Robert Frost, which I did actually quote Robert Frost. And then boom, it just puts the numbers in for me and the actual label. I don't have to worry about it.
So how do you get it not to end the trial? Does it not?
It pops up every once in a while saying, hey, this is the free version. You should buy it.
Oh,
You just click
can you just click cancel? Oh, okay.
And so if you guys all do want to move to, I had no idea it was free as well. Just acquired it probably.
It's probably not that expensive.
It's about $89.
Oh, never mind.
So the nice thing with it is there's different plugins it has, and the LaTeX one does things like automatic citation, and if you Command B on a Mac, which is build, you have to get a different actual PDF reader called Skim on a Mac to do it, but it automatically builds it. So, and just to show you one thing, and this is why I push for a lot of people to switch, is if I came into here and just changed my document class, I just want to show you how. That'd be great.
I think there's something
So if I did this as article
else.
and rebuild it, oh, that's going to actually throw an error.
I'll be
Not the best one to do that kind of stuff. Because it's going to find it. Okay, yeah. Basically, it would have stripped all the formatting and just made it look like a normal paper. But the problem is that I can't just show you using it like that. There's tons of stuff that I use that's specific to their style. So it's going to error on everyone, like conference info and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we want to know why you have a bunch of tabs that say .xml and .python and stuff. And it says here you can use
Because this is
Python-based plugin API, but I don't know why you would want to do that.
my text editor. This is where I do my coding and stuff. I was just working on Block Talkie earlier today. That's all.
So you're just using it for other junk too.
Yeah. So this is why I was mentioning some people might not all Sublime Text because it's commonly used for programming.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to, you could use Notepad, but you won't get anything to kind of give you any support. That's why something like Sublime Text with its plugin for LaTeX, or if there's another tool, and I'll mention it again. I'll mention it, and it's on the slides. what Chris Rogers actually pointed out to me, and it's a free tool for Mac, and it handles all the building and everything else too, because it's kind of one of the trickiest parts of LaTeX. If you don't have some sort of tool that can build it for you, you actually have to break out the terminal and run certain commands. And I don't even like doing that anymore, because you usually have to run like 3 commands to get that PDF spit out. But this stuff, for instance, I just hit Command V, and it says right here at the bottom, textification succeeded in ours. So yeah, I would personally I would recommend Sublime Text because it's great. And let me show you the bib file too. I always do that in Sublime Text. It's already in here. So you can see here it is, the bib file. See, I have a couple papers by Lykoff. We got 2 Schulman papers, and so this is so all these different things. When I come in here and type /site, that's where it's pulling all that from. Which is why this is great. And this is on Windows too.
Yeah.
So,
So then how can you see, like, as you're making changes and like making tables, how can you see them on what they'll look like?
So you just rebuild it, and usually what happens is this is going to be weird because it's going to really, really squish. So, for instance, say I want to change the name of the introduction to the beginning. Save it, rebuild it, and it'll keep it open, and it reloads, and boom. So as you're tweaking it, you just rebuild it again.
Rebuild it, and then is this, so over on the left, is that
So this is the actual PDF.
PDF? Is that just like a PDF file?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It's the PDF that gets generated.
Okay, cool.
It just literally names it whatever your name your tech file is .pdf. So this
Okay,
is
so it like
metaphors we
keeps
keep.
writing over it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's why if it's open, like for instance, if I go back to, and I better not save it again. Oh wait, I have it. So if I want to make it back to introduction, this is another nice thing that Sublime Text does as well. It's called Sublime Text. Is that whatever you're working on, like see how my cursor's at introduction. When I actually save and build, you'll see it that it'll highlight it when it actually reloads because that's where my cursor was. So you can
Oh, where your cursor is.
yeah.
So you can see where you're.
So you can see where your cursor is in comparison to that. So if you wanted to start playing with the table down here, for instance, this is so tricky because this is like tiny. So maybe I want to say zombies and zombies spelled wrong. So rebuild it, and you can see if the zombies and just add extras. So that's kind of usually how I work with it. Is that's nice because the nice thing about working with PDFs too is that you can just keep them open and they'll just reload every time they get changed. And if you're doing it with something like Sublime Text, if you decide to use that tool, I like that it uses the highlighting of where your mouse is because then whatever you change, you can go, oh, that's exactly where it was in the code.
And now using Sublime Text is probably a stupid question, but how do you get it such that it knows that you're working on a program through LaTeX?
It knows just by the suffix of the file that you have
Like
open.
when you save it.
Once you save it.
So usually it just as soon as you start it, just open up, save it as something.tech, and it'll handle it all
Okay.
from there.
So Emacs does the same thing. Though.
Yeah, I used to use Emacs. It just Sublime. Ever since I switched to my new Mac with the Haswell processor, Emacs just does not like my battery. So I switched. Plus, there's some really cool stuff that Sublime Text can do that just Emacs just can't.
Cool.
Like multiple highlighting of the same, or things that are useful in coding. Like you can literally take a list of items, break it down to different lines, or like if you had a list that are different lines, bring them up, comma, separate them, turn them into an array like that. Which I know is like nerdy stuff, and you're like, I don't care, but like there's other cool stuff built into it. And if you start to learn the shortcuts of Sublime Text, you'll find that you can
Cool.
get around it really quick.
So if you're in Mendeley, you can you can go in your library and select what you want, like using command, you can multi-select, right? And then if you right click, you can either copy, and then it says copy as you can do bib text entry, or you can export to bib text, and it'll actually make that bib file for you straight from Mendeley. And then you can put that in the same directory as that, and if you're using something that has a little pop-up, it would be the same thing,
Right.
except then if you wanted to add more
So
You would
then-
have to get into the whole
And-
copy paste nonsense.
Yeah, and this is one thing I want to just point out again is that I have this line here at the bottom that says /bibliography and the name of the bib file without .bib on the end. And so if like the little pop-up thing doesn't work until you actually tell it what your bib file is, because you can just call it bib.bib.
So wherever you save it, like you can just right click in the delay and then export it and say to save it as.
So yeah, so
to your
to give you an
.bib.
idea of like a good
Just
way
like
to
that,
organize your files when you're working with this as well is I'll open a finder with it real quick. And this is my personal way. You guys obviously do it however you want, but I do papers and then whatever the paper name is. This is this one paper, and then I tend to name files based upon a bunch of different stuff. Now, when you build LaTeX files, you get a lot of extra stuff that you can just ignore. All you really care about is the text file and the PDF file. There's always intermediate files that get built. You can just consider them garbage for all intents and purposes. There's nothing really special in there. It's just really the bib file and the text file are your two big friends.
And then how do you download LaTeX onto your laptop?
So, I have some resources for that listed, but you just literally Google download LaTeX. And I think I use for Macs. Let me double check. I also want to go into math mode. I know it's already been an hour, but if you guys still want it. So I'm using Tech Live. This is the name of the distribution I'm using.
I think the Magical hard drive has
As
a
well.
distribution for LaTeX.
You just download it
I know.
because it'll be old. So you can just Google Tech Live, and that's the one I use on Macs.
LIFE?
It's usually pretty big, by the way. It's usually like 300-400 megabytes, if not larger. So I'm gonna show you guys math stuff real quick, because do a lot of you guys put mathematical equations and such into your papers?
I don't.
Do you do?
I think it would be kind of cool to know.
So
I mean, I think
it's good to know because like I've used it for weird things, like in my artificial intelligence question or class, for instance. I did all my homework in LaTeX because I'm a nerd, and when I'm doing first order logic and I needed all the different symbols like negation symbols and for all and there exists and things like that, they're all within there. And so basically, this is why the dollar sign is a reserved symbol. Whenever you're writing in math mode, it's actually surrounded by dollar signs. And so if you look at the beginning of the example where it says LaTeX is great at typesetting mathematics, let X, and so you can see what that spit out to.
CapEx.
Just capitalized?
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't used it for too much. So you have like plus C dots and plus X. And so if you look at it, you
Yeah, you can figure it out.
It's very simple. It's very simple, exactly. Now, if you're looking for something specific, like, oh, I need to find this exact Greek letter or something like that, there's tons of cheat sheets out there for just if you search LaTeX math mode, whatever you're looking to do. I actually am going to probably put together a cheat sheet that is comprised of a couple other cheat sheets of stuff that I think is important. Now, one of them is like a 150-page PDF, and I'm going to send that one out to everyone. And we'll be like, oh my god, 150 pages. It's not meant to be read. It's more best used as a resource. Like, oh wait, tables. I need to remember tables. And it has like pages and pages of tables. You can just find what you need.
Yeah.
It's a big PDF, but it's a good one to have around. So yeah, math mode is just surrounded by that. So you can see, some of them make sense. Fraction.
Totally, a lot of
So
them make sense.
things do things. Yeah, they all make sense. Square root, sigma.
How do you do superscripts?
So it's just in math mode,
Uh-huh.
you just use the caret.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
No.
What's it spit out?
Lower. Oh, well, now it did. That's weird. It didn't work for a while when I was trying it, but now it does.
That could have just been something odd that was going on with right.
That's what I was like.
But yeah, the caret. So yeah,
That's what I was hoping for.
some of it's just, and if it's not surrounded by the dollar signs either, it won't. The caret means something else when it's not within the dollar signs. So anything within dollar signs means, hey, we're in math mode now.
Mm-hmm.
So even like, say you write a whole formula, and then say you want to refer back to that maybe a specific value, like X in this, you can go back into math mode so that it'll be typeset to look the same as it did when it was in the actual equation. And I'm talking about like you'll read a paper and it says like E equals MC squared, for instance, and then later on it says M, and the M will be typeset the same way it was before. So you can just do that. You can just put it around the dollar signs around it again. There's also, I might as well mention, because there's lists and they're in there as well. And it's kind of like a table where you do begin tabular, except you do begin enumerate. You can do items or dots or itemize where it automatically numbers them. So let me come back into here real quick. So this, like I said, I'm going to kind of send out to everyone, but a few good resources. So LaTeXproject.org is like one of the main ones, and CTAN, which I cannot remember for the life of me what it actually stands for, is not only a good place for resources, but CTAN also hosts every single package that is out there for LaTeX, and you can search through them as well. So say you find something that somebody mentioned, usually you pull them down from CTAN. Are you guys familiar with Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange? There's a LaTeX one. It's stack.stackexchange.com. So a lot of times you'll get hits on there, which is, I mean, I still to this day will go find things through Google because it's, the nice thing about it is that once you kind of have this foundation and you start playing with it a bit and you get to know it, then you have the basics down, and then as you're going on and you're writing more papers in it, you learn more and more, and you're like, oh, well, this is a great package for this, and this is a great package for this. And that you also can consider your papers kind of like code that you previously wrote. And I guess I'm a computer scientist, but that way there's no like rewriting of anything. So it's like, oh wait, I already did that kind of table in this paper I did before, and you just go and pull through it. Yeah. And so software, I'll have to find, I did find this one thing on Windows called LaTeX Editor, but if you were going to go with Sublime Text, then I would go with Sublime Text. And there is this one other one called Tech Shop that Chris Rogers pointed out to me. That's free on Macs, but once again, if you guys are all going to go with Sublime Text, then I would recommend that just for simplicity. You can also make it look however you want. So is there anything else that I haven't kind of mentioned that you guys commonly do in papers that you want to know, or?
How do you change the font of just part of it?
Like the font itself?
Yeah, like ICLS, they wanted all the headings in Arial, but all the body text in Times.
Let's see if there's a sample in here. Just to show you it without.
I just do what I'm asked. I get very far in life.
I would just be like, no.
So it actually, because you're actually overriding something
It's
in
hard.
this, so it's a little tricky,
Okay.
but it would be something like this. Renew command, family default, and then SF default, which means
Oh, it's
no
mad at you.
sense. Oh yeah, it's not happy right now. It doesn't like that.
Oh.
Well, I just threw that in. So, but yeah, that's the kind of thing that you can go ahead. And if you want to do it overall, obviously it's at the top. And like other little things are simple, like bolding is just simply text BF for boldface, and italics, and these are things that eventually you just kind of. Oops. And I know my little window's tiny over here, but there's a way to make this bigger. But that's just kind of how you do bold.
Is that where you do a lot of your editing, or do you do it all in
I do it.
Sublime?
I do all of mine in Sublime.
And it doesn't do automatic updates, so you can't see it sometimes.
No, it doesn't do them automatically, but I just saved them. And so it also gets you into a good habit of hitting save all. So it's not really anything wrong or bad with that.
This is our.
No,
Now that tech shop thing, I
that's what I was
haven't,
just going to ask.
I
What's
haven't
the,
played with it, but that might have, like from looking at it, it looks like it keeps both the paper itself and
yeah,
it up, and it's free, so I'd recommend maybe giving it a shot. And it's kind of like just finding what you like. I mean,
totally.
I used to use Emacs for years when I switched. It's just, turned out I liked some LaTeX more once I started playing with it. So that's kind of a matter of personal preference. So that's kind of why I would really, go find and try what you like. And if you have questions like with installing tech itself or getting it all working, I can come and help with that. But
Cool. Yeah, if you want to help install
Yeah.
that program, I have tech already. This other one. TL.
so any more questions, or you guys probably need? I hit you with a lot of information. You probably need to play a bit.
Yeah,
So-
and process it.
Yeah.
So a good way to, I would mention that a good way to learn this, and I'm going to turn off the recording soon, but a good way to learn this is if you have a paper that you're writing for a class that, hey, you actually started early, or you have a paper you're writing.
That's funny.
Yeah, I actually, I've already started my philosophy paper, but by started, I mean I figured out my topic, kind of. But anyway, or if it's a conference paper and say, you have enough time to write it, because the nice thing is you can just write the content mainly with just begin document, end document, with just document class of article at the beginning, and wait to do specifics a little later on. And that way you can start playing with stuff while you're writing the paper. And basically that's the best way I feel to get used to it, is just write something in it that is not something that you're on a big time crunch to finish. Something you can take the time to play around with. In worst case scenario, if you're still learning, you're like, I can't get this one thing, and I just want to turn this paper in. Grab the text and throw it in the stupid Word. Get the formatting you need that you are used to. But that's the nice part. It's just all markup, and you can just strip it all out really quickly. So you still have all your raw text. Because that's why I wanted to show a real paper example, because this has a ton of commands in it. And that's because they're just showing a bunch of different things. But in an actual paper, you'll get giant blocks of text where all you have is like a citation.